I should probably get a little bit better at these introductions, but I wanted to talk about something that I have been experiencing for quite some time now, and I shared about this on my TikTok and my social media, and there were a lot of you that related to this topic, and I wanted to kind of expand on it a little bit differently on here. I have realized now that I have been in some form of isolation or in an isolation season for about, I was literally counting this yesterday, for about 13 years now, since around 2013. For a long time, I thought that was when it started. I guess I would say that is kind of when it officially started. But the more I reflected on it, the more I realized that that's not actually true. I think my isolation has shown up in my life, though, in different ways for as long as I can remember, even when I was a little kid. And this is going to be a little vulnerable. I'm going to kind of share some information with you guys for a little bit. But you know what? I think that this is part of building a community. And so why not open up to you guys? Growing up, I was very shy, uncomfortably shy. I was also bullied, and I usually felt like I didn't quite fit in anywhere. I didn't know how to explain the sadness or the loneliness that I had felt as a young kid, as young as 5. So I learned how to just live with it very quietly. I learned how to stay small and how to watch instead of jumping in, how to listen instead of needing anything myself. And it wasn't just shyness. I was extremely tuned into people, their expressions, their tone, the energy of a room. I remember doing this as young as 5 years old, constantly reading the room and adjusting myself based on what felt safe. I didn't just experience emotions that a normal kid experiences. And I say this because I'm a parent to 2 kids. And just, being around other kids, I realize that now. When I was at that age, I analyzed them and I learned how to observe people rather than just really enjoy them, and rather than just really join them. And looking back now, I don't think that my nervous system worked like a typical kid's. I was always scanning. I was always aware. And if I'm being honest, I would probably describe myself as neurodivergent. And that honestly explains why my husband jokes that I am a robot sometimes. I'm very good at staying composed and hiding my emotions. I very rarely lose control, which sounds like a strength until you realize it came from learning not to need too much. When opening up doesn't feel safe as a child, your nervous system adapts and you learn how to protect yourself by staying very quiet, being agreeable, and not taking up space. And that became my default way of moving through the world. It kept me functioning, but it also kept me disconnected. My senior year, things got a little bit emotionally heavy. I entered in a state of depression, which, looking back, I do think that I was exposed to mold, which is another story to share. And I didn't know how to ask for help. And so I pulled away. I isolated myself from my friends, and I barely graduated because I was extremely depressed, and that was the only way that I knew how to survive, by isolating. And so in college, I moved into a different city to escape what I was feeling. And the same pattern I had, it just looked a little different. It showed up as numbing. I had surface level friendships, distractions. I would stay busy enough to avoid feeling. I would party a lot. That was my way of not actually healing. I was just coping. And then postpartum just really stripped all of that away. When I had my first baby, I realized how alone I really was, not just emotionally, but in a very real, practical way. I did not have a village. I did not have anyone except my mom, really, and one of my best friends who lived in another country at the time. And so nobody was checking in for a long time. I had always thought that something was wrong with me, and I see that now differently. I've started to understand that sometimes God allows isolation not to punish you, but to prepare you. And what's interesting is that there is also a neurological reason that this happens. We don't just learn from the people around us, we absorb them. I worked at a job once. After the partying in college and everything like that, I had hit a moment where I realized that what I was doing was incredibly toxic to myself. I realized that one day, and I woke up and I, again, did what I knew, the only thing I knew how to do was to isolate myself and to leave everything behind. And so again, I quit my job randomly. I stopped talking to all of the people that I was partying with, and I went in pursuit of something new. I had found this job, a high-paced sales environment where you're doing face-to-face sales. I was doing business to business, and it was a very interesting job. But it did teach me a lot about myself, how to open up as a person. And it was the first place that I had worked in that talked about, leadership mentality. They promoted looking for mentors. One of the things that they would say is the 5 people that you surround yourself with are the 5, is what you become, essentially. And, when I think back about that saying now, I learn from that neurological perspective is that we don't just learn from the people around us, we absorb them. We pick up their emotional posture and their beliefs and their limits without even realizing. And so when God starts to pull you towards a new version of yourself, one of the first things that has to change is what and who you've been shaped by. And so, over the last couple years, especially as I've been finding my way back to God, this showed up as loneliness for me. And unfortunately, it was also something that I realized that I had been going through from as a young child. When I hit postpartum, I noticed that my friendships, they had faded. It wasn't like I had friendships that just fell apart. Nobody was mad at me. It just silently disappeared, which I think made it harder for me because I never got like a closure, And the community, they never showed up the way that I expected. And it just felt like I had no village. I realize now that I wasn't abandoned. It was separation just with intention. When you stay surrounded by people who are either living in fear or survival mode, just settling for less in their lives, your nervous system can naturally mirror that. Even if you want more, you end up adapting that same mindset, and your body can stay stuck in that same posture. When you are living in isolation, it kind of forcefully interrupts that pattern because now it's quiet. now there's no background noise. And when you're in that quiet, that is when you start to hear what you actually believe, what is going on in your thoughts that's not being mirrored by other people. And you end up learning what you actually want and who God is shaping you into. That is why there were a lot of people in Scripture that were formed in hidden seasons before they were seen and before they were able to be trusted with any form of influence. They had to be shaped in obscurity. And your identity gets solidified in private very long before it can survive in public. But there's also something that's happening in your brain during these seasons. Your old patterns that you learned along the way, they start to get weak. And the stories that you've told yourself for years, the stories that I told myself for years, they slowly started to loosen their grip. I went from experiencing mourning season after, during this isolation season, I went into what I would consider a mourning for the friendships that I had lost, because I was never one that had a lot of friends growing up. I always had 1 or 2 or 3 really good friends as a young girl. And so I think that the mourning season that I had gone into, I was extremely self-critical because I blamed myself for going into that isolation season in the first place. And I always told myself, well, if I didn't get depressed in my senior year, then maybe they would, my friends would still be there. Maybe I'd be in a different situation. Maybe I wouldn't have left the city and I would have, experienced college with them and life with them, and they would have been the ones that I would have partied with. And so I blamed myself for many years. But then eventually, after I had my second baby, really before my second baby was planned, and I went into the second pregnancy a lot differently because I had now accepted what had happened. And so I intentionally did not have a baby shower. I didn't plan for any of those things because I was already mentally prepared for what was going to happen. I was mentally prepared for no one except, my mom and, my best friend in another country to check in on me. And then the things that no longer fit who you are, they just slowly fall away. And when you're isolated, God then can become your loudest reference point instead of the culture, instead of other people's expectations. And over time, you just start reflecting something a little differently. And that understanding really changed for me. And the loneliness, it didn't magically disappear. It wasn't like I suddenly felt okay feeling alone. It wasn't like that. I still do often feel very alone, and it does come in different ways. And I never want to sound as someone who is dramatic or broken or just shallow and ungrateful. I am just being very open with you guys. I am someone who has been strong for a very long time without being held in the ways that I needed to be held by a community specifically, because my husband, I do want to clarify that he has been there for me. He's been my rock. My mom has been my rock. My best friend has been my rock. But when you realize that you don't have, that community that you crave, it catches up to you eventually, especially when you become a mother. I ended up realizing that the core truth underneath is that I'm not bad at making friends. I'm just very good at surviving without them. And those, I think, are very different things. But I don't think my isolation was random. I think that it was just adaptive. And then God does what he does best. And he started to rebuild me in reverse order. Before God gives me community, he gives me language. And before he gives me people, he will give me clarity. And before he gives me friends, he gives me leadership. I'm now, going through a mentor dynamic where I play a part of being in charge of a community role. And the same way that my own platform is growing is in parallel. And I don't think that that is a coincidence. I think that I am learning how to build the very thing that I never had. And I am learning this from the inside out, not as a consumer of a community, but as a steward of it. I realize that I've been trying to skip the middle step emotionally because I want all those things, but my nervous system is still bracing for shallow and unsafe and disappointing ones. But the loneliness, it doesn't magically disappear when you find God. It just stops being pointless. I realized God wasn't ignoring me. He was reshaping me, and he was helping me separate from identities that I had mirrored for years and just slowly becoming the strongest influence in who I am today and who I will be in 10 years. I was not alone. I was just being formed. Before elevation, before the visibility, before influence, God just makes sure that your identity is steady and that the outside influence of the world doesn't define you. Rejection doesn't scramble you. That is preparation. That is God making sure that the next room that you walk in doesn't pull you back into the version of yourself that he already healed. If you are in your isolation season, I want you to know that you are not alone, regardless of what kind of isolation you are in. Maybe it's isolation from your dysfunctional family. Maybe it's from friendships as well. Maybe it is from relationships. Maybe you have not been able to find a partner for yourself. I don't think that you should pressure yourself to try and solve this in one simple fix. I don't think that there is a step-by-step plan that I could give you. That is a lot of weight for one season. I don't think that you should try and force closeness where there could be misalignment just because of history and scarcity or any sort of obligation. And so I guess what I want you to take away from this is that I think you should try and consider thinking in containers, not crowds. Instead of friends, think of one environment, one reoccurring place, one shared rhythm, one low pressure point of consistency. What I'm learning is that community grows from repeated proximity, not forced intimacy. I don't think that you are failing. I think that we are just navigating a transition. When I spent most of my life being the container for others, listening and being an anchor and being a safe place, I am now learning how to be seen without performing usefulness. I'm learning that. I know now that we are not behind, we are not late, we are not missing something that everyone else might have figured out already. We are just in a rebuilding season, not a barren one. Isolation is going to teach us depth. The leadership that I'm learning is going to teach me the structure, and the community is going to come when my nervous system can believe that it's safe to receive it. So I don't think that we need to decide everything right now. I think that our only next step is the one contained in a repeatable environment. My takeaway from this is that I am learning to build a community on here. And I feel like this is a pull from God to keep going. And I continue to receive messages from people that I have been inspiring them to please not stop. And so this is me committing myself to you guys and to let you know that I would really like to build a community on here. I would like to feel like a friend to some of you, to all of you. And I have no idea where this is going to take me. If you are in your isolation season, please know that you are not alone. You are just being formed. And I hope that this can help you in some way. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow. Please like it. Please share it. Maybe you know a couple people who are also in a form of isolation, and maybe this could help them too. My goal is to not reach 1 million people. My goal is to just reach one person who can feel a little bit better with my words. And hopefully this can help resolve something within you. That is all. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you guys again on the next one.